I introduce us every time. Hello, and welcome to Fauxropter.
Hello. I could have done it. We kind of extemporize. We just don't frown at me. Oh, do you want to do that word instead?
I don't know that word.
We do ad-lib it. We just make it up as we go along, don't we? These intros.
We do.
Yeah.
So welcome to today's episode.
Yeah. We're completely shameless about it.
Good one. That's not the word we're doing. John Dutton.
Oh. Wait, the sound of a face palm. So the real word we're doing is...
Shaming. So welcome back to Fauxropter. I'm Bobby Gaucher, and this week's word is shaming. The person who cannot understand that seems to be John Dutton in front of me.
It's shameful.
Can't.
There's no doubt about it. I can't get this word in my head. Shaming.
Even though I think...
I'm feeling a little shamed right now, I have to admit. Yeah. I'm
pretty sure this was your word originally. However, I think I'm going to have more to say about it.
Yes, and there's a reason that Okay, to be honest with you, guys, we like to be honest here.
I hate
guys
being honest. But here's the secret, and I do like secrets and gossip.
This is an episode that we are re-recording.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons we are re-recording it is because we already did an episode called About Cancel, episode 10.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple of months later, or maybe 6 weeks later, we recorded Shaming.
Yes.
And we actually repeated some of the content.
Oh.
Like, we had the same thoughts, in other words, right?
And it's just, I find our episodes, because we both listen back. John edits them and sends them to me. I listen to it, and then we agree, and it gets published. So when I listened to this one after it was already edited,
yeah,
I didn't love it.
Right. So there we go. So we have some flexibility, and there's no shame in that. So what new input do you have to bring to the table in terms of shaming, Bobby?
None. Let's do the whole thing, all of the input about shaming. I think shaming's interesting for just tons of reasons. Mostly because when me and you discuss it in regular life, I think I internalize shame a lot more than you do. So if you're thinking about how you could be shamed in the 21st century world, a lot of it has to do with body shaming, slut shaming, parental shaming, and just kind of social contract shaming that we allow to happen that is just this very quiet bullying.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I it's true that I seem to be somehow impervious to this, but I'm probably not completely. I think I just try to avoid situations that I could be.
Yeah, that
I
feels
could receive
shameful.
some shame. Yeah. But the parent one is actually a good point because when you're a parent, especially the first time you become a parent,
mm-hmm.
you're so insecure about everything you do that it's always possible for you to make some decision regarding your baby or your very young child that other parents don't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to pipe up.
But they pipe up in such an interesting way that it's like a coded insult.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, like in terms of like a parent, oh, you use formula. So in terms of a parent, one of the most interesting arguments I hear is about formula versus breastfeeding.
Mm.
There's nothing shameful about using formula. However, for young mothers, especially first-time mothers, and a lot of the time there's postpartum depression,
mm-hmm.
not being able to breastfeed your child or choosing not to breastfeed your child, it becomes a very coded language of, oh, that's what you're doing?
Mm-hmm. Just the tone as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, like, again, me and you have discussed, and you're like, oh, I don't know if, like, I could be ashamed or if I'm normally ashamed. I think there's so many ways that you can internalize it, and especially any insecurity that people don't notice.
Yeah.
It's so easy to quickly let shame eat you up.
Yeah. And by the way, just a quick sidebar. I don't want it to make it seem like I'm a psychopath who can't feel any normal human emotions. I'm just English.
Yeah. Even though he claims he's Canadian.
No, and that too.
Yeah.
Sorry. So yes, that's it. And shaming has this cultural aspect to it, right, as well. It's not just because, personal shamings existed forever, and there's probably social evolutionary reasons for that, in the sense that we evolved as social animals, and shame serves a purpose to maintain group stability in terms of norms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a reason for it to exist in human psychology, but nowadays, because of the internet, we get, like with tons of other things with the internet, everything gets amplified socially.
Yeah, and I think it's just a new context of shaming. So the first time we spoke about this, I brought up my body type, and that sometimes if I wear a tank top, it would look inappropriate on me, whereas it wouldn't look inappropriate on someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Does that have anything to do with my body? Not much. Does it have anything to do with the way they make clothes? Mostly. But should I feel ashamed if somebody walks across the street and says something like, oh, she chose to wear that? I wouldn't think I'd have to be ashamed, but I don't want to make other people feel uncomfortable. So that's the part that I wanted to discuss is, does shame have to do with how you make other people feel? Or is it just how they make you feel?
Well, I would say that it's a dynamic, right? Because that's the whole thing about social interactions and social norms is they're continually negotiated and restated, reinforced. And so it's bound to be a back and forth, right?
Because we've entered an era where, like, slut shaming's been kind of abandoned because women are allowed to wear what they want, do what they want, feel as powerful as they want. And if their body has to do with that, A-okay, no problem. However, I still don't want to make somebody feel uncomfortable. I don't want to walk around naked.
But this is the example you're giving there is the sort of tail end, or at least the current version of, you can still read about that in Jane Austen, for example, that I'm reading right now, rereading Pride and Prejudice. And, the idea is that if you're a woman who, let's say, loses her virtue before getting married, you're
sullied.
You're lost. Yeah, you're sullied, you're dirty, you're lost. You live a life of shame, right? So shame was used to put women in a certain position in the social dominance structure, right? Where they are subordinate to men because they had this thing to be ashamed about that men didn't at all. Yeah.
And I think that's super interesting because I don't think, at least publicly, a lot of men are ashamed of their body or shamed for their body. So body shaming would be the next context of it.
Yeah.
Should you be ashamed if you're overweight, if you're underweight?
Yeah.
And that's something that people are obviously severely insecure about, is the way you look and the way that people perceive you. So why should you have to feel ashamed about your body?
It's a very good point, right? Because of course, women historically have probably borne the brunt of this kind of shaming, except that I do think it's true that nowadays, for whatever reason, you can be more, I don't think you would almost ever be body shamed if you were a man 50 years ago, 250 years ago, whatever. But now it's true. You could be overweight. You could be, I don't know, you could be like,
well, I think
hairy or something.
I guess.
Extra hairy. Oh, that's definitely true.
Well,
like a man who has like a hairy back, that's like, they feel embarrassed and ashamed in our culture anyway. I don't know about other places.
Well, I think the gym is a strange context because it's such a social place, even though it's such a social place where everybody kind of is to themselves, that even like there's mirrors literally plastered around a gym. So you're there looking at yourself, trying to define muscles for whatever reason, which some could be like pretty superficial reasons. You could want to just look that way. But you see everybody looking at you at the same time.
Yeah.
And then the argument is anybody ever actually looking at you?
Or are they just looking at you for themselves? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Right. They're just comparing themselves to the people around them.
I think a lot of shaming, while yes, it's absolutely an action, and there's very like concrete examples of shaming. Like the Catholic Church likes to shame people and use their guilt to maintain stability.
Oh, right. Because guilt would be like a sort of attached feeling, wouldn't it? Emotion or something. Like it's attached to shame.
Yeah, I think shame turns into guilt.
Okay. Well, isn't guilt that guilt would depend on something you've done though, right? Does shame, because you're talking about shame could be just how you look. It's not really something you did, is it? Is it always? Or are you because you're responsible for what you wear, I suppose, in terms of like the clothing thing that you were talking about, right?
Yeah, and I think like if your body looks a certain way, you could feel guilty about it.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not quite the same thing, right? Because if like guilt, if you've killed somebody, even if you killed them accidentally, you could feel guilty, right?
But you'd be ashamed of it.
But you might not be. Let's say if you hit somebody in your car and killed them, you can feel guilty. But if you were drunk and you hit them, you should also feel ashamed and guilty. I feel like
you should feel pretty ashamed anyways. You're a bad driver.
Well, no, but what if it was completely not your fault? Like they ran out in front of you. You can feel guilty because you killed somebody, but you shouldn't feel ashamed. Then why would you feel ashamed? You didn't do anything wrong.
But wouldn't you be ashamed when you told other people because of their perception of you hitting somebody with your car?
You could imagine their reaction and potentially feel ashamed. I feel like.
I think all you've done is clarify that you're a robot with no shame.
Okay. I am. Well, I don't know though, because there's a purpose to it, and I don't think that follows from the purpose. I don't think accidentally killing somebody is shameful because it was an accident. That's the whole point. You didn't do anything wrong, and the point of shame is to normalize behavior according to your society's morals, like what's right and wrong and ethics and stuff.
That's super interesting because do shame and guilt both have to do with morals?
And I'm sure that people with bigger brains and bushier beards than us have talked about this stuff in the past. Oh, by the way, Bobby doesn't have a bushy beard.
Thank you. But okay, that's another good example.
So because now we're getting to real philosophy and morality.
But if a woman has a beard, it's something she can't help.
Oh yeah.
Does she have to be ashamed of it?
She absolutely doesn't have to be. And I recently ran into a woman at a bar patio who was just sitting there with a beard, and it was like she clearly was not in any way ashamed or even self-conscious, which I suppose would be step one.
So I think the self-conscious aspect has a lot to do with it, because I know if you are a person who feels like people are always looking at you, you feel self-conscious. You are very aware of your actions, what you're doing, how your performance is. If you're not a very self-conscious person, shame would come less easy, I would think. Absolutely.
And in fact, it's a bit of a misnomer, and we could do self-conscious in a different episode, because I feel like if you're self-conscious, it's not quite right. It's not just that you're conscious of yourself. You're conscious of other people looking at yourself.
Of the perception of yourself, yeah. So I don't think I'm a very self-conscious person. I don't think people are ever looking at me in any context. However, I do feel shame as soon as I think people are looking at me for the wrong reason.
It's interesting because I am very self-conscious, but I don't feel the shame. Isn't that interesting? I don't think we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to have to have some. We're going to have some guest therapist or somebody come on for a 4-hour episode.
We're going to have somebody with a real bushy beard come and tell us what's what.
Yeah, but hopefully a woman.
Yeah, that would be better.
All right. Yes.
I have one more thing to add. So I don't know if this is a real term, but I know it's something that me and my friends use. We have a word for the hangover you get after drinking and the anxiety that comes with it, which is a shameover.
Okay.
So you either feel ashamed of your actions, you feel ashamed of what you could have said to somebody, how they could have interpreted it, because obviously alcohol really heightens everything. And then it's a depressant. So the next day you don't feel great. Like aside from just like a headache and stuff. Like I know for myself, my anxiety pretty much attacks me as soon as I have a hangover. And I have this response to just feel ashamed of everything I've done. Even though most of the time I just hung out with my friends, had a great time, chatted, laughed.
But nobody's actually shaming you. Because don't forget, the word is shaming. I finally learned it by the end of the episode, the word we're doing.
But I'm shaming myself all day.
There we go. Self-shaming. Yeah, that's an interesting, well, that could be a whole other discussion, right? So in your opinion, though, is shaming problematic? I'm talking about the sort of internet shaming or maybe not even, but well, maybe kind of a bit like in, say, parents group on Facebook or something like that. That's still internet.
I think it's not nice to shame other people, but I think no matter what, we're going to do it.
But do you think I can see why you're saying it's not nice. I don't think I really sort of shame people, but like if you saw somebody, I don't know, kicking a dog or something, wouldn't it be a good idea to try to shame them?
Oh, yeah. And I like the idea, like, we do publicly shame people a lot. Like, we publicly shame men now. Like, when social,
Yeah.
like, there's a justice system that doesn't necessarily deal with sexual abuse, assault, or misconduct properly. So we publicly shame people.
Exactly. So if somebody does some behavior that is at best inappropriate, you're saying that if there's either the justice system isn't doing its job properly or it doesn't quite fall within.
If there's no check or balance.
Right. If it's not exactly illegal, then shaming does serve a real social purpose.
Well, another good example would be if you wear fur.
Right.
I think people are constantly publicly shamed for wearing fur and like kind of promoting, I would say, like something disgusting.
Right.
That like PETA activists all the time.
Yeah. And so so it really is a sort of, there's a lot of fluidity to this whole thing. It's like, it's all very well to be like, well, it's wrong to shame people, but like, it isn't always, I don't know.
Well, I think it's natural to shame people.
Yeah.
It's just part of, like, it's the same for judging. But, you can't help it.
But shaming, I would say that the input that I would have would be shaming somebody that you run into on the street who's wearing fur, for example, right? Which is a bit similar to the kicking the dog example. The defenseless animal is you're somehow responsible for it having a bad time. Yeah, I mean, like this, it's hard to say that it's wrong to shame them then, right? But the thing is, the online version of shaming becomes piling in and sort of bullying very quickly, right? It's a mob.
Well, the anonymous aspect of online shaming is not good.
Yeah, and I think we probably did talk about that when we were talking about cancel as well, back in episode 10.
But I think even though, like, I think the example of fur is interesting because it's what somebody is wearing. But when I go out in a tank top and feel a shit, like, it's such a fine line of what is okay to shame and what's okay not to. And people just subconsciously shame. Like, it's not my fault for what I wear. However, if somebody's very conservative and see me wearing something that's offensive to them, they're going to shame me.
Yeah, they're going to try to put you in your place somehow. And
if I have a problem with what I'm wearing, I will feel ashamed of it.
These two things are a bit different. This is a very good example of you wearing a tank top and somebody wearing a fur coat, though, because you are being shamed to make sure that you comply with a very conservative dress code, whereas the other person is being shamed because they are supporting a cruel industry.
And showing it off.
And for their own benefit, showing it off. Exactly. So I don't know, if anything, I would say there is a real distinction there that you can come to when you look at that very specific example about wearing clothes, which is interesting. Yeah,
because at the end of the day, it's every time you put on clothes, you represent yourself.
All right. Wow. Okay, this is a world record length Fauxropter here, folks. I hope you've stuck with it. Although, Fauxropter's episodes are a lot shorter than many podcasts.
Exactly. And if you've turned us off by now, shame on you.
Good one.
Thanks. I thought you'd like it.
As always, please rate and review Fauxropter on whatever platform you listen to us on. We really appreciate it. And send in your suggestions for words or any other comments to fauxropter@gmail.com.
Hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening.
And we will be talking to you soon. Bye, Bobby.
Bye, John.
So yeah, it turns out shameless and shameful aren't the same thing.
We're doing shaming.